all yours.
You ready?
Yeah, sure am. Yeah, it's all yours.
Okay. I'm Aryeh Halivni. I'm sitting here with Mr. Sam Schulman in Richmond, Virginia. It's March 28th, 2017. Why don't we start at the beginning? Tell me a little bit about your family, where they came from, where your parents were from. If you know even further back, your grandparents.
My grandparents originally are from Lithuania, outside of Vilna, a small little town. Then they moved to Warsaw, Poland, with the shifting of change of the Germans and the Russians and so on and so on. So they settled in Warsaw. And my parents, those are my grandparents. My grandparents were originally from a small town outside of Warsaw, and eventually they moved into Warsaw too. And it so happens that both families moved into a project. Well, it's not a project. You know, European buildings are a series of courtyards. So if you're in that section of several buildings, you only know that you know everybody in that area. It's like a small little town. You don't know anyone from the other streets because it's similarly built. And both families became very friendly. And my father was the oldest of 5 siblings, and my mother was the oldest of 5 siblings too. And when they grew up together, so to speak, and they became teenage sweethearts. And eventually my grandfather, on my father's side, before World War I, came to the United States, and he came to Louisville, Kentucky, to his older brother, who had settled there before 1900, and sent tickets to come to the United States to the family, to his family, my father's family. And what happened is that World War I broke out. My grandmother and father and siblings were in Danzig, which was the port of departure, and no ships were going anymore to the United States. So they came back to Warsaw and spent the years throughout the World War I back in their own apartment. And my family, on my mother's side, helped them out because they had no means of support, so to speak. I couldn't get any funds from my grandfather, who had come earlier and was sending money. And my father, who was 14 at the time, 15, worked doing all kind of menial job to support his family. And after World War I, they finally came to the States somewhere around probably early 1920s. And my father and mother, my father said, will you wait for me? And she said yes. And I have the postcards and letters that they wrote each other constantly in Polish or Yiddish and so on. And in 1927, my father went back to Poland, married my mother over there, and I was born the next year. He brought her back. I guess he waited to be an American citizen to be able to bring back. I think in those days, if you married an American citizen, you could come back. You didn't have to wait for any quotas or anything. And I was born in 1928 in Terre Haute, Indiana.
How did you get to Terre Haute? That's where they decided.
The reason is because my grandfather, having been trained by his brother, his older brother, he had a 5 and 10 in Louisville, Kentucky, a general store like. And he told my grandfather, now, when your family comes, you go on your own. I'll help you financially, but you go on your own and, build something. So somehow they wound up in Terre Haute, which is probably about an hour away from Louisville, Kentucky, I'm not sure. And he opened up with my father a surplus, World War I surplus army store. And Terre Haute was a mining town, to the point that today you can't get cave-ins because underneath it's all tunnels where they excavated, and once in a while a whole street comes down. So they were selling World War I surplus clothing to the miners because it was very rugged, shoes and everything. It was lasted for a long time. And that's how they survived there. In 1932, my father came home from work and complained that he had a stomach ache. So my mother said, "Oh, what did you eat?" He says, "I had this and this." And he says, "I don't feel good." So they called, those days doctors made house calls. And a doctor came and examined him, and he says, "Oh, you probably have something, I'll give you something similar to an Alka-Seltzer." So he took it and he felt a little bit relief. And then they went to sleep. And in the middle of the night, my mother said he jumped up on the ceiling and he was screaming his head off. They called an ambulance, took him to the hospital. By the morning, he was gone. He was misdiagnosed. He had peritonitis and it burst. And that was the end. So my mother wanted to be near her family, who happened to be in France at that time. And then, so against the advice of my American grandparents and siblings and children, my mother says, "No, please stay here, please stay here." My grandfather, when I was born, stopped going to work from what my mother said, and he took care of me. I'm the first grandchild. And so we went back. We went to Europe, where my family from Poland at that time was in France. And in 1935, the Depression here had hit France, and part of the family from Poland, my mother, her older sister and family, and a cousin, a girl cousin, which was a year younger than me, and her husband and her father, we went back to Poland, and we stayed there 6 months. Why? My grandmother urged my mother to remarry, and because the money that she got from the insurance from the death of my father dissipated very quickly. When she came to France, everybody had their hand out, help me, help me. So she did menial jobs, and the good luck was that in 1935, when we went back, a friend of my grandmother said, my son is coming to visit me, and he just divorced his wife. And maybe, you could get together your daughter and my son. And they clicked, and they married right there. We stayed there within a few weeks after that he came, they married there, and we went back to France, which is why I'm here speaking to you, one of the reasons. And he did not adopt me, but he gave me a roof over my head, food on the table, and clothing on my back. And that's all was necessary. And they had a very good life, very good life. And then World War II started.
What language did you speak at home?
At home was Yiddish, basically Yiddish. English that I learned in the first 4 years of my life was gone. I mean, it was my mother didn't speak a good English to begin with, and then there was no reason for her to continue in English. And so Yiddish is the first language. Of course, I went through the French school system, so French is my second language. And I like to say I speak French better than the French people, which is not much of a lie. I can really, when I am in France or with French people, they don't know what background I am, what religion I am melting the decor, you know. So we went back to France, to France, did my schooling there. In 1939, my stepfather, who happened to be a rabbi, but not a rabbi with a pulpit, he was a fundraiser for one of the biggest yeshivas in Poland, the yeshiva of Radom. I think they had several hundred students, and he was the main, what do you call it? See what happens when you get younger? Fundraiser. And once a year he went back to Poland just to speak with the rabbis, and he was so well versed into the religious and the Torah that even the Lubavitcher had respect for him. That's how much he knew. He could do the Bible from the back to the front, from the beginning to the end, and vice versa, or the middle, wherever you did, he could, you know, I mean, it's just one of those gifts, you know. That was his profession. And where did he fundraise before World War II? He used to go to Jewish communities everywhere in the world except the United States. North Africa, the Middle East, in Europe, and he did it for 3 months, and he had enough. His cut was the yeshiva had enough funds to carry, and for the 9 months he was at home and enjoyed life. So he must have been a very, and he had a assistant, we used to call him a secretary, who was not a rabbi. He was the son of a rabbi from the same area. So they did very well, because he got his cut too. He had sports too. Anyway, in 1939, he decided to try his luck in the United States. And war broke out. So he went just, the last ship that left Europe went to the United States. And within a week or two, he couldn't come back. And the problem with this is that people wanted to hear the sermons in English, not in Yiddish. And he was not proficient at all in English. So that was bad. And he couldn't come back. No ships were going back to Europe in 1939 after the outbreak of war. So he got stuck here on Ellis Island, and he had found some cousins, distant cousins, and they got him out, and he got to work in the yeshiva teaching the Talmud. In the meantime, we are stuck.
Where in New York?
In Brooklyn, in the New York area, and we got stuck in France. And then in 1940, the Germans entered France and started all this stuff. Now, I was an American citizen. I didn't have to register as a Jew. My mother was of what they called undetermined nationality. She never kept up a Polish citizenship, and she was only a few weeks away to become an American citizen in 1932, when my father passed away. But who's to know or to think what's going to happen in the future? You can't tell. So she didn't wait to become an American citizen, and therefore she couldn't come back. The American embassy was willing to send me back at 11 years old to the United States, but not my mother. And I was her interpreter, and I grew up very fast during World War II. in 1942, so we did the best. We didn't get any money from the United States but the Congress made a law that any American citizens stranded in Europe, especially when America went into war, the Swiss consulate would take over their interest, and I was given $50 a month, converted into French francs. And that helped us survive the next few years until the end of World War II. In 1942, during the big raid of the roundup of Jews and undesirables, could mean gypsies, could mean anything else, we were not on the list. But a month later, there was a second follow-up, and the Germans, with the concierge and the French police, came around. There was a curfew at 6 o'clock on Jews, and we were finishing or getting ready to eat supper, and there was a knock on the door, and my mother was going to open it up, and I said, and I heard German speaking, French speaking, and the concierge. And we were right eating like here and the door. And my mother was going to open up, and I said, if anybody wants to come in, it's after 6 o'clock, it can't be friends or anything, let them break down the door. And then I heard the concierge says, well, they might have, because of the curfew, they might have still stayed over at friends, so they're not here. So the guy said, well, we're going to break down the door if they're not here. It's useless. We'll be back in the morning. So during the night, I packed, I'm going very fast, but I packed all kind of bedding for my great-grandparents. You know, the comforters with the duck feathers and everything that was over 100 years old. You don't know what to grab, and put them into potato sacks. In those days, that's how. And lucky, across the street from us, where we live in Paris, there was like a railroad UPS. It opened at 6 in the morning. So we sewed up everything, put a label, and we sent it to friends who we knew were in the Vichy France, what they call the free zone, the non-occupied zone. Whether we are going to go, I don't know. And then now keep in mind, my mother didn't speak any French, or very little of it, just because in Europe in the old days, there were no supermarkets. There were small little groceries, and all you had to do is point this and know a few words like I need bread, I need milk, and that's it. So I went, I knew of, my parents knew some French people, and I went to see him.
You're 14 years old at the time?
Yes, 1942. Or became 42, or was going to be 40. No, I started my in July of 42. I was 14. And I went to see that person, and I told the women, I said, can you help us? The Germans came to pick us up. Can you keep us until I find a way to get over to the free zone? And she says, Sam, I'll ask my brother, I'll tell my brother, he has a little hotel near the Eiffel Tower. And she called him up, and he says, all right, tell him to come. And the thing is, she says, I won't charge him any more than the prevailing price of a room. I'll put him in the back, and I will not have him sign the, what do you call it? You know, in Europe in the old days, you had to sign in because the cops used to come and see who you are and leave documents. And then the next day when you leave, they would give it back to you. So he says, we won't register that you are a guest in the hotel. Fine. So we stayed there 2 weeks. In the meantime, we couldn't cook, so I brought in food, cold food and so on. Keep in mind, my mother was kosher. And so it was mainly vegetarian stuff. But she said, for you, you can eat whatever you want, you're growing. Here's someone who's religious. This is a pekuach nefesh, so it's all right for you, but not for me. And I made the rounds. I went to the old Jewish neighborhoods, and whoever was around, I kept asking, do you know anyone who smuggles over to the free zone? And one guy said, here's a person, see if you can contact them. So I went to the guy, and I went to that address. And in the meantime, my mother's stuck in the hotel. She couldn't go out because she had the yellow star on her. I didn't have a yellow star. And I met the man, and I said, can you take us over? He says, yes, I'm a railroad engineer. I take trains over from the occupied zone, goods to the unoccupied, and from the unoccupied, I bring back goods. Well, Vichy France was unoccupied officially, but unofficially there was a German presence there too. So it wasn't unoccupied. It just was easier for the Germans not to occupy, to put more people in half of France. So I asked him how much he would take. He says, I really don't know, but I never did that before. This is the first time. He says 1,000 francs a person. Okay. So I came back to my mother and I told her, and she says, well, I guess we have to. So I went back to him and we made a date to meet him when he takes the train from one of the rail stations in Paris, going to the free zone. And he says, when you come in that date, we will go as passenger, because the train I will take at the at the border. And you come as my family. So we met him at the rail station, and of course he showed his pass as a railroad man, and they knew him probably. And he says, this is my wife and boy, and they let us through. As we going on that, platform to our train, passenger train, I saw on the other platform across the Germans with the roundup of the Jews being sent to Germany. And I told to my mother, don't look to your right. And she says, why? I says, don't ask questions, don't look to your right. Because I didn't need it to go like this, you know. And we got into the car, and I said, don't look, just look the other side. And when we took off, going to the border, to the unoccupied zone, I told her they were deporting groups of people there. And we got to the border, and he said, I made arrangement with a farmer, or with someone, a friend, that is alongside the railroad tracks to keep you for the night. We went into the basement. I think he probably gave him some money too, but a good friend. And he says, in the morning, I will come by with the train and slow down. I'll give 2 whistles. After I'm cleared by the Germans to go over. So I'll come by alongside, outside of town, and you'll hop aboard. Now, the embankment, the railroad track is in an embankment. So you had to go down like a hill into the tracks. When we woke up in the morning, we tried the best, and I had a piece of bread and cheese or whatever she had there. There was a downpour, tremendous downpour, to the point that my passport, American passport, everything was blurred because it went through my clothing. It was the summer, August. So we slid down the embankment, and we waiting there for the train to stop, slow down. Up there I hear dogs. The Germans with patrol dogs are going alongside the upper part. The dogs couldn't smell anything. Had there been no rain, they probably would have discovered us and pulled us up. They passed by. The train came. He slowed down. But you know, when you get on a train, on a platform, you're even. When you on the embankment, I couldn't even reach. So that was a freight train, but he slowed down to almost to a crawl, and we are running after and trying to grab and get up on the train. And he just grabbed my mother and pulled her up, and then he grabbed me and pulled her up, because we couldn't reach the first step there to get into the engine. Anyway, we got into the engine, and he gave us some chairs to sit in between, and then we just moved on along. We got over. He says, now you're in the free zone. He says, we'll be in Limoges, which is the town that he would be his last stop. Limoges was famous for porcelain before World War II. Today, I don't know. It was a small town, but a major town for France. And we got into Limoges, and he said, this is it. So we paid him. And he said, good luck to you. And subsequently, we heard that he was taking 5,000, 10,000, 25,000, but per person, of francs. But he never, what some smugglers did, take money before and then got them straight into the Germans and got paid from the Germans or the French police. Both ways. So we were lucky that the man in that respect was honest. And it was the first, I don't know why he did it, because had they found out, he could have been shot. They had no mercy on anything like that. So we got into the railroad station, and I don't know the town. So I'm looking in the telephone book, and he says Jewish congregation or something like that. And I asked people where the street is, and we went there. And I asked in the office, we just came over from Paris. He says, you're not alone. I says, wait, we are hungry. He says, we have a kitchen here. We'll eat first, and then we'll talk. So I said, is it kosher? He says, yes, it's kosher. So my mother ate first real hot meal, and me too. And then we said, we would like to go to this town, which was about, in those days, it would take several hours. Today it takes a half an hour or an hour to get to that small place where my friend's family was, who happened to be friends with my family too. The parents were friendly too. But he was my best friend, almost just like brothers.
Wait, from where?
From Paris. We went to school together. We went to religious school together, and we're inseparable. We live in the same area, a few streets away, but we were very close to each other. And my family and his parents were close friends too.
What's his name?
His name was Leon Stenik. And he passed away a few years ago. And they said, all right, there's only 2 buses a week going to that area. I think there's a bus after tomorrow. I said, where can we stay the night? He says, we have people that are willing to take people for a night or 2 and so on. So we stayed over with one person. And then we boarded the bus a couple days later, and we got to that little hamlet, little village, let's say village. And we knock on the door. We ask because there's no name. It's just one main street with houses on both sides. We knock on the door, ask people where people, knock on the door, and his mother opens up. She says, "You're here. What are you doing here?" I said, "Well, we made it. We got out of Paris and smuggled out. And also, did you get our bedding, our packages?" She says, "Yes, they're here." We didn't know what to think of it. So he said, "Well, can you find us a place where to stay?" He said, "First of all, come in." And they were very crowded. His sister was there, his father was there, and his grandmother. And it was a very small little house. But you know, in Europe, if you had one bed, you could put 20 people in it to sleep over. It was not the most restful place, but you put feet to head and head to feet and so on, and everybody slept in the same place. So we stayed overnight there, a day or two, and then she says, "You can't stay here. There are too many Jews here." I says, "How many?" They says, "There's about 10 Jews here, and it's not good, and more is going to come, and it's no good." So they said, "Well, I'm going to try to find someone a few kilometers away." And did find in a little hamlet, there must have been about less than 100 people living in the main town, a 11th century church, 2 forge for shoeing horses and repairing farming equipment, and a little grocery store, 1 bakery. You know, very, very simple thing, because most people did everything for themselves. You grow your own vegetables, you bake your own bread, so you don't need any of the other things. And we found a little house of which we had only the floor, the upper floor was closed, 1 story was closed. So she rent us the downstairs, 1 room, a bed on this side, a bed on the other side. In the center was a wooden stove. You can cook and heat, a table and 2 chairs, and that was it. And then we had a garden, on the upper part a garden, also a stone shed where you could put the wood to put in the oven, in the wood stove, and another room which you could put cold stuff like potatoes to keep, you know, anything that, because people, anything vegetables, so on, you don't keep them. You had no refrigeration. Water, we had a well in front of the house, was the well of the hamlet. People used to come there to get their buckets because there's no water in the houses, no running water. For restroom, we had all the way up in the garden a what they call it, an outhouse. You don't sit, you squat. And in the winter you have to go out there, but we have a potty, you know, they used to have in Europe underneath the bed, and then you empty it there. So then what do? We told first of all, I contacted the Swiss consulate in Lyon, France, that we are here to send money over here. And there was a post office, so at least we had some money. It was not so much to buy food, it was to buy, if needed, clothing or items, shoes or something like that. Actually, we didn't wear any shoes. We had the clogmaker make us wooden shoes, and you get used to it. It's not bad, not bad. And in order to survive, we got friendly, or I got friendly, with a farmer who needed help because the young people were conscripted to go to work in Germany for the Germans. Not as laborers, but still not forced labor, but laborers. I think they got paid something. And so there were no young people helping to do in farms. So I worked on the farm for 3 years. And my mother used to help out, especially when it was potato country, when it was to pick up and pack the potatoes and other items. And I ate, and we had all the food that in return of our work, we had all the food we wanted. We had milk, cheese. Once a month they made those huge breads in a wood oven, which I don't know how that bread could keep for 1 month, but it was still tasty. Even, it was like this. No refrigeration, just laying outside. Here it gets moldy in 2 days if you leave it out. Anyway, so this is how we spent. And there was another Jewish couple that came, and that was it. A week after we settled in that little hamlet, the priest came along, knocked on the door. He says, I understand you refugees from Paris. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you that when we moved in, the mayor, who is a farmer, he's just, that's as a secondary honorary job, he came and he says, you're new to the area. Do you need anything? You're refugees from Paris. I said, well, we need pots and pans. We need this and that. He said, no problem. And they really supplied us with a lot of stuff, plates and stuff. My mother, we didn't bring anything like that. We had to do something. So my mother kept some for kosher. And of course, before that, she made sure it's kosher by putting the fire in it. And me, she has trefa stuff, non-kosher pots and pans that she didn't taste, but she asked me to taste. So I ate very well. And besides, I ate very well at the farm, because when I worked there every day, or almost every day, I was given a breakfast. It's like an Israeli breakfast, you know what I'm talking. And then there was a break, because these people they work hard, but they like to eat. And sometime I stayed for dinner, and it was great. So this is how we spent the time there for 3 years. The priest came and he says, my children, they haven't seen you in church. You're just new. I said, Father, we are Jews. And he says, oh, my children, forgive me. I did not know. I won't tell anybody. I'll find an excuse while you're not coming to church. And that was it. Every time I saw him for the next few years, he must have been in his 80s, he just took up his little yarmulke, the priestly little beanies like. It's almost like a Jewish yarmulke, but it's a little bit a black little cone thing. He would go like this, and I said, good morning, Father, how are you, and everything. Never anything, and it'd been quiet. No one in the church Sunday morning was something to see. The only ones that went to church, the man brought the church, brought the families to church, women and children, and they went across the street to the bar. And I asked one, I says, don't you go to church? He said, no, there are 3 times we go to church. When we baptize, when we marry, and we die. Otherwise, the women and children go there. And they wait for Mass to finish, and then they pick them up. That's where they spend their Sunday morning while the family is in church. Oh, well, anyway, so everything was very quiet. except at one time, and when America came, I was registered as an American citizen. My mother was registered as a Polish citizen. And when America went into war after Pearl Harbor, a gendarme, we had no police in our area. The next town where my friend was they had a little gendarme, that's country police. They had maybe 4 or 5 who controlled the whole area. We never saw them, but that time they came on bikes, no cars. They didn't have any cars then. So he came on a bike, knocks on the door, and he says, Sam Schulman? I said, yes. He says, my God, you're a kid. I said, what it's all about, sir? He says, well, I'm supposed to bring you, because you're supposed to go, as an American, you're going to be interned with British in a prisoners in a camp. So I said, all right, sit down. He was already drunk. He starts in those days, wine was the first thing that they had in the morning, not coffee, wine first. So he was already tipsy. So I put a bottle of wine. That's the first thing you do. And I'm drinking with him. And he says, I can't do that. I'm going to tell the captain, the chief, that I didn't see you. And that was the end of it. So after 1 hour of drinking and just talking about things in general, he just left, and I never saw him before. So that was one of the incident. And otherwise, every time we went to see my friends, my friend and family, and that was 5 kilometers away. We made it in less than an hour on foot in those days. And we went in the morning and came back in the evening or the afternoon. And every time we went, they always said there's going to be a raid, hide. It never happened to us. But one time they really said, the Germans are sweeping through the countryside, don't stay in your house. So we asked one farmer, I knew other farms, I said, we would like to stay overnight here in your barn. They said, why? I said, because there's some ants in our place and we want to fumigate and we have, she said, sure. So we slept in hay in a barn. It was very nice in the morning, and they gave us something to eat, but my mother didn't eat. And we went back, and that was the end. So we never had any problem. If we didn't go to our friends, it would have been quiet. We would never have any problems about raids or hide or anything like that. And then...
Did you have any word from your father during this period?
And we had occasionally through the Red Cross, occasionally, maybe once or twice in the 3 years. So that was about the only thing. And then, of course, the liberation came, the D-Day, and then the Germans were backing up, leaving, retreating, and one place not too far from us, they packed every local person into a church and put the church aflame. That's called Oradour-sur-Glane, which was, till today, they leave it as a monument. They never rebuilt that area. That was really something. So, it was, looking back, it was, we were sleeping with one eye open, so to speak, And then after Paris was liberated, I told my mother, I'm going to go to Paris to see who is back and if we can get the apartment back. Because apartments were, every time a Jew left, the apartment was filled by somebody else. No problem. Same thing with businesses. So I went back. It took a long time because British were demolished over the rivers, and so we had to walk on makeshift to get the train the connections. I got to Paris, and I went to where we had the apartment, and the apartment was occupied, but I wasn't interested so much because I knew we're not going to stay there. So I went to see if my stepfather's family was back, and they were back. So they said, tell your mother you can come and you'll stay with us. So I made the rounds of, first, before that, I made the rounds, I needed food, so I made the rounds of the different organizations that were opening food canteens for people that were coming back. I went to several of them, and then I found one that I felt very comfortable. It was a left-leaning Zionist organization. The philosophy didn't interest me. The people were just nice, as opposed to other Zionist organizations who were very cocky. And the food was not as good in their place as this place, so I was more with this place here. The people who were cooking was really delicious. So,
what was it called?
It was called the Politie and Smola, but then they merged with the Mapai and so on. And it was the Borochov Jugend, if you ever heard of that. You heard of that, Eric?
I heard of Borochov.
Bear Borochov, yeah, he broke away from the socialist in Russia and said you could either stay in Russia, you could go to Palestine in the old days. Anyway, I went back to get my mother, and I told her it's time we can go back, and we said goodbye to all the people in town. I mean, we were like natives there. And we went back to Paris, and I contacted the American embassy, would open up again. And I told them I want to go back to the United States. Said, but your mother must need an affidavit. So my uncle in Minneapolis made an affidavit. In the meantime, while waiting, I went to work for the American Army as a messenger. And I put in a year with them. I still have a what do you call it? I can't pull them out all now, but recommendation of my work with the American Army. So finally, my mother got the affidavit, and I had no problem. And in February of 1946, we came back to the United States. And I made the rounds of my American family throughout the United States. And Eileen, are you listening? Oh, you're going. All right. And what time will you be back? Eileen? All right. Anyway, what time will you be back? At 3, okay. So while we're here, I made the rounds, like I said, my American family, get reacquainted. And my grandfather was no longer alive. He died a few years after my father. And my grandmother was still alive, and she really, here was the toughie who ran the brood like with a strong fist, strong arm, and she broke down when she saw me. I mean, it was really very emotional. And I got a job doing it.
Which city is this now?
There were Minneapolis.
So you went to Minneapolis?
I went to Minneapolis. I went to Michigan to see one of my aunts and family, and I went to Toronto to see another uncle and his family there.
Did your mother come with you? Or
No, didn't come with me. But my stepfather had met my uncle, the rabbi, My uncle was a rabbi in Minneapolis for over 50 years, very well known. Orthodox, but liberal.
1 second. And this is your uncle how? This is your...
My father's youngest brother.
What was his name?
Nahum Schulman.
Nahum Schulman?
Yeah.
And your father, your stepfather...
Yeah. Met him somehow, and he says, it was not a good encounter because he says, I'm Sammy's father. And my uncle says, how can you be he's my brother's son. How can you be his father? So there was a little bit of, he was a little bit pushy.
What was your stepfather's name?
Moshe Nissim Maidenbaum.
Maidenbaum.
Maidenbaum, yeah. So, but anyway, it turned, they made peace later on. You know, he had two rabbis, you know. Anyway, to continue, I went to work doing some as apprentice or something else, and I kept in touch with the Zionist movement that I had met in France, and when I left, you know, weekends in France with this Zionist group, we used to go hiking, you know, indoctrination, but the indoctrination rubbed off me. It was, you know, to me, a philosophy, communist fashion didn't mean anything, you know. I liked the people. The people were honest and they were good. Okay. So we decided that we are going to go to Palestine and build a settlement and live happily ever after, and we'll dance every day the horror forever. Good. Little did we know, but okay. Now, keep in mind that what I went through from the time I was 11, I had hardly had any childhood. And then later on, to take care of all the business, I was actually my mother's, so to speak, husband. Did everything. She couldn't help anything. The only thing she had, I won't ask her, do we have enough money to do this and this? She says, I think so. I never knew how much money we have or anything. But if I needed something, and she says, I think we have it. And she did have it, but not big fortune, and nothing was coming in. Actually, during World War II, while we're still in Paris, I learned how to do pocketbook work. We're taking out piecework, and we had to do part of a handbag, of a lady's handbag. And I learned a little bit of that. So when I came to the States, I went to one of the factories. One was called Corette. He was the #1 in the United States, very luxurious. And they said, I went to the Pocketbook Workers Union, and I told them my story, and they said, I'm going to give you a good place where they'll teach you a good job, like framing handbags. That was the top of the piecework. So I learned how to be a framer when handbags had frames. If they made it without frames, just a snap, I was out of business. You know, but I learned my thing well. As an apprentice, I didn't get much, but I survived. And I still wanted to go to Palestine.
What year is this now? When is
That's 1946.
It's 1946.
Yes.
You're living in...
I'm living in Manhattan on 14th Street.
Okay.
And I'm living, my parents lived in one place, but it was not room for me, so I took a flap house on 3rd Avenue and 14th Street. I think I was making $12 a week, $2 went for taxes. $9 remained. $2 was for my weekly rent. It was a flop. It was a steel bed with a it was one room, a dangling bulb from the ceiling, a steel bed with a beaten up mattress, but I'm young, so I could even sleep on the floor, was even better. An outdoor to wash up and do whatever you need. That was $2 a week. Food, ate at the Horn and Hearted. Everything was 5 cents. Breakfast, 15 cents. Coffee, a roll, and some jam and something with it. Lunch, 25 cents. You had a nice little sandwich and a drink with it. And supper, sometime I ate at my parents', sometime I ate across the street. You had a pasta place. They used to pile up pasta for 25 cents and no doggy bag. So if you couldn't eat it, you had to leave it behind. They threw it out. So I wasn't starving, and I was able to save $5 a week at 5% at the Bowery Savings Bank. They paid 5% deposit in savings. Today they give you nothing, right? Anyway, so I persevered, and I finally, one guy said, why don't you go up to this organization, was the Halutz. I went up and I told them what I want. They said, how old are you? I said, I'll be 18 in July. They said, come back after you're 18. We don't do anything unless you're 18. And
to move to Palestine?
Yes, yeah, but I didn't know what they were talking about.
Okay.
I didn't know. I assumed 18, okay. So I came back in August or September, and they said, okay. They said, do you know anything about seamanship? I said, do you know anything about seamanship? I said, have you ever been? No. They worded it this way. They didn't let me know what it entailed. I had to find out later. They said, have you ever been at sea? I said, yes, going from the United States to France and then coming back years later from France. So they said, okay, I want you, we give you some money to go to Baltimore. There's a ship there waiting.
Okay, I just want to pause for a second here. It's now 1947.
46. We're still in 46.
Still in 46.
This is August of 46.
August of 46.
Yeah.
You're involved in Hechalutz.
Yeah, well, kind of. Yeah.
And they say come to
there's a ship.
These questions, and you're not sure. You don't know what you're not sure where they're headed with this. You don't know.
I assume I'm going as a passenger.
This is your.
There's
trip.
a ship there waiting.
You're going to Palestine.
Yes, the ship is going to Palestine, and if you want to go, you're 18 years old. I didn't connect this thing at that time.
What about your parents?
When I decided, I told my mother. My stepfather was neutral in that, you know. He never laid a hand on me, never guided me. My mother was the sweetheart. I wish everybody had a mother like this, or should have had. And she never laid I was an only son, didn't have to lay a hand on me. I was nice, I was polite if she told me to do something. And sometimes I didn't want to. She says, okay, you'll do it next time. You know, she had ways, and she had no education, maybe 2 years, you know, in the early when she was a child, I think 2 years of grammar school was the maximum. Girls didn't go to school. And then when the siblings started popping out of my grandmother, she was the oldest. She was the proxy helping my grandmother, helping her mother raise the other kids. That's the way it was. Maybe still today in some families too. Anyway, so we are still in 1946. So I told my mother, I'm going to Palestine. She says, you're an only son. Why do you want to go to Palestine? Let somebody else go. I said, but I want to go. I have to go. She couldn't hold me back. And I didn't know what I was getting into, because the Halutz didn't say anything about what. So they gave me some money to go, I think something like $20. That will take care until you get to the ship. So you go to Baltimore. I got there. I get on Pier 6. I walk alongside those giant merchant ships, and I'm looking for a passenger ship. I asked some of the, by the way, by that time my English, I had learned, self-learned English, and I was coming along very nicely. And I asked some of the seamen on the docks doing some kind, do you know where the President Warfield, that's the ship they told me. They said, well, what kind of ship is it? I said, I don't know. Well, they said, we know, is it a merchant ship or whatever? I said, I don't know. He says, well, we don't know. Ask somebody else along the pier here. And here, those monster merchant ships, and I keep walking, and then one guy said, tell you what, I think that's that derelict down at the end of the pier. It's like a ferry boat, and there are a few guys there, why don't you ask him? So I went over, and there were about 4 guys, and I says, that's the ship that's going to Palestine? They said, no, we are going to Oklahoma. And in my mind, Oklahoma's landlocked. How can this ship go to? So I said, okay, thank you, and I walk away. And I'm thinking to myself, I've been giving the wrong information. And then they called me back. They said, come on back. We're just joking. Yeah, we're going to Palestine. I says, when? I said, first we have to fix the ship. Then the captain, the port captain came. His name was Captain Ash. Smoking a cigar, an old salt. Jewish, by the way, Captain Ash. You know have you been a seaman? You know anything about seamanship? I said, no. Oh, another guy like that. He says, here's $100. Go to the Arundel Hotel until we get the ship fixed up, cleaned up, seaworthy. And you come every day and until we get the crew together. What is he talking about, you know? But $100, I never saw $100 just outright, you know. So fine, and that was the price. That was a able seaman was making those days, union rates, $100. You know what $100 is in 1946? Everything is a nickel? My God. I don't know if that held me back, but that was not the reason. And, you know, and then they started, I met those guys, the other volunteers.
Do you remember their names, those guys?
Yeah, one is one was Cy Weinstein. I know them all, the 45. It's now hard to remember. Bill Millman, he was a Navy guy. These are Jewish guys, but there were also only one Christian guy. He was a priest, but that I'll come to it later. So you can see it'll be beyond the 1 o'clock, I assure you.
Are you pressed for time? What's your time frame?
1:30.
Okay, I tell you what, Stacy, I can talk, but you can get additional information on the internet if you look up what my son Mark, and it's there. You'll have additional information, so you can figure out the thing. But I will speed up, give you the most important, not the side one. I tell you, the German TV 3 days. I was exhausted. God, I don't talk. I'm usually very quiet, you know, and I can go either way. I can say nothing, or I can talk my head off. And, you know, my wife, don't record that. I don't want it to hear. My wife is an outgoing person. She's friendly with everybody, just like my granddaughter in Israel, who's 8. The whole world, do you have any, how's school? The school's not, but there's one boy, he pushes me around, but I like him too. He's a bully, but I like him too. Everybody, the whole world, I'm friendly with everybody. That's Eileen. Anyway, so here I am. The crew is slowly coming together. Every day, a new recruit comes, and in Baltimore.
But do you realize what's going on?
I have an idea. Yeah, one guy, the first mate. Oh God. I'll come back to it. The first mate was a merchant mariner, and he had volunteered. You know, people, I'm not talking about Navy people, I'm talking about merchant mariner. During World War II made good money because they were getting union wages, not armed forces wages. He gave up and he says, I want to help my people. He was a merchant mariner. And he had a license of first mate. And he told us that he had made one run a few months before. And he told us about it. He didn't tell us about fighting the British aboard.
But did you know at this point about
the Aryeh? It slowly started coming together.
Even not being that you were going to be part of it, but did you know about the idea that this was going on at all?
I don't think so. I don't think we were talking about going illegally or anything. We assume we can go to Palestine, you know.
Did you know that it was happening in Europe?
That what?
That people from Europe were going?
No. I only knew the people that came back survived in France. Not the ones that came from, the ones that were held in the camps, that remained in the camps, waiting. They didn't want. They went back home, and there was nothing home. They were kicked out of where they were, so they came back, and they were under the protection of the UNRWA that was supporting them. They had nothing. Those that came back, like like some of my stepfather's family, came back to something, and they picked up there. All right, they like his brother-in-law. To me, their uncle. He came back from Auschwitz. He had gone. He had volunteered for the army as a Polish guy in the French army at the onset of the war. Was taken prisoner in Germany. And when there was an armistice with the French, was sent back, demobilized. Then he was picked up a year later and sent to Auschwitz and survived. I once asked him, how did you survive? He didn't answer. I didn't want to ask any more questions because later on I found out some did things beyond of what they would have done normally, but it's a matter of survival. And do you exonerate, or do you say you should have gone, instead of helping and survive, should you have gone in and let somebody else do the job? I don't know. I have no answer. You know, you try, as long as there's a spark of life in you, you try to hold on to it, no matter what. Sometimes you do the wrong things that you wouldn't do normally, and it's preservation of the self. Then you become, it's me. I don't care about my family, my brother, or something like that, or thing. I come first. I think it's part of the human leftover from from the prehistoric ages, survival of the fittest. So anyway, so he told us that he had taken one ship and they transferred some people at sea, and then the British caught him. There was a little bit of a fight and so on. It didn't mean anything to us, you know, and then he let it go. What's his name? Oh my God. Sometime I'll get it. Anyway, so finally the ship got its complement of 45 men aboard. One was a Methodist priest, John Grohl, who came along as an observer. So we fixed up the ship, and a month later, and then we moved out of the hotel, and then we didn't get any more $100 a week because we were now room and board aboard the ship. So we got $40 a month for whatever we need, shoes, something like that. Just keep in mind it's 46, everything is a nickel. My wife still ribs me, you're the nickel man. You always try to save a nickel. I said, well, anyway.
Were any of these 45 Israeli?
No.
All American?
All Americans except one. Ike Aronovich.
Ike Aronowitz was in Baltimore?
Yes. He came to Baltimore after the ship was set up. He came, but he was not the captain. We had two captains. Captain Schlegel, when we went out at sea to a trial run. The trial run, we almost sank off Cape Hatteras. I don't know if you know, Cape Hatteras is the graveyard of ships, and we hit a storm. And this coastal President Warfield was not named the Exodus. President Warfield was a ferry boat, flat bottom. Boy, did we get sick. Did we get sick. And we took on water about a half a day out of Baltimore. Well, around the Cape, or maybe more than half a day. And we were taking on water. Everything, the lower cabins were full of water. We were pumping and the water kept coming. We started getting ready to abandon ship. We put on life jackets and we got up on deck. The Coast Guard came along. They said, do you want to abandon ship? We'll take you aboard. Ike said no. The captain, Schlegel, who was not Jewish, says, I think we should. Ike was asserting himself. He had a second mate license, a British license, but he was one of the few that had seamanship as a Palestinian Jew. The other one was Gad Ehud. He was a real captain. But he was not on my ship. That's the second ship that I took. So we finally got back on our own to Norfolk, and they realized that the anchor hole, the anchors where they come down, it was open. So the water was coming through there. So what happened after 2 days in Norfolk, we moved it to to Delaware. What's the name? To one place in Delaware where they pumped out everything, cleaned out everything, and sealed those anchor holes. And we took on 2,000 life jackets. And then we started. Captain Schlegel left. He says, I'm going on. These were retired captains. This was a retired captain. He got paid a good regular price to do the run. He quit. He says, good luck to you guys. He says, I still want to live around. And Captain Johnson came on. He was a younger guy, but I don't know where the organization got him. And then we went across. Sea was calm, everything was fine, and of course, between Thanksgiving of 1946, that's when I actually went to Baltimore, until February or March of 1947, those that were Navy people and Merchant Marine people, the few guys, taught us how to learn seamanship, how to splice cables, how to splice ropes, how to paint, how to steer a ship, how to keep a watch, all that jazz. So we were, although we were not, we didn't get diplomas for it, we knew what to do. Each one had a job. They put me at the beginning into the engine room. After 2 days, I said, I was suffocating there. It was disgusting. The oil was dripping over, it smelled. I said, if you don't put me up on deck, I quit. I always threatened them. They said, okay, Sam, you'll go on deck. They put somebody else down there that wouldn't complain. You know what it is to be in a sweaty, smelly, stinky engine room underneath you don't see the daylight, you don't breathe any fresh air. So I was up there, everything was fine. They couldn't afford to lose people. Out of few million American Jews, there were 250 guys that were in the Aryeh. Out of the 250, there were at least 30 non-Jewish guys, nice guys, that gave up also being salaries as seamen to help. Whatever reason. My friends are Jewish, I want to help them. All kind of reason, and nice guys. I mean, tough guys, but they joined. They gave, they helped out. They made one run, there were 2 runs. I knew a few of them too. Nice guys. And so with Captain Johnson, we sailed across, smooth going. We stopped in the Azores overnight to refuel. We went on to Marseille.
What countries?
Portugal. The Azores.
What countries' papers were you?
I had the Honduras Seamen's paper. Oh, yeah. I sit too long.
Watch your mic there. You're still hooked up.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't know if I have it. I'm sorry. No. I have them somewhere, but everything is so... No, that's not the one. No. So it's Honduras, and my qualification was bombero, which means fireman. But that everybody had we couldn't get the American Siemens paper because we would have to pass a test, you know.
And this was all arranged
By the Mossad al-Yabet, whatever you want to call it. There's an organization that took care of all these things.
Did you meet any of those people?
Not in the United States. I met them in Marseille, France, later on.
Okay.
One was Rudy. He was the main guy there, and he did all the work there.
But Ike was sent by Mossad al-Yabet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So we got to Marseille. We stayed there a little while, and then we went on to Italy, to Porto Venere. We stayed there, I think about 2-3 months. And we had carpenters, Italian carpenters, come aboard and tear out the whole inside, all the cabins, and build bunks like in the concentration camps, you know, for people to sleep on it. And of course, we told we're going to take several thousand people. How many, I don't know. And I helped also to build those bunks, you know, it's like cubicles, you know. You know, 4,500 people. It's a lot of people on a small little boat. Well,
how many did the boat carry?
500 the most. There were enough cabins, luxurious cabins for 500. We ripped them all out. We made it just, and then built like concentration camp where you see the people just moved into a cubicle. And let me tell you, you know, you need air. You know, a lot of people, there's a lot of heat getting there, and you know the funnels those funnels are not the smokestacks is not just for smoke; it's also ventilation. So you know you have to make sure that people had to come up several times in rotation on deck to breathe. That's afterwards. So we fixed. We set up we prepared the boat for refugees in Porto Venere, Italy. That's near La Spezia. And of course, we had shore leave every day. You know, we come, go. We ate aboard, learned how to eat Italian food, which was very delicious in that area, you know. And also we had stipends, you know, also small little amount for when we were in port, to buy clothing or something that you needed, tobacco, booze, whatever. And then we went on to Set to pick up the refugees. And the next day after we came in, we saw all these 4,500 people come. Took the whole day to load. It's amazing. Everybody knew, everybody came with a leader. The leader was told, you go here. He made sure, and he said, and we told him, once you're aboard, you stay inside. You lie down. And, you know, because we have to keep loading. You can't have people floating around on deck while we're loading. And we want everybody in, not on deck. deck is not enough room for 4,500. A few hundred at a time on each side, and then you stay an hour, and then you go down, then anew, just to change the breeding. So.
What did they have with them? The refugees.
They were wearing 3-4 pants, men, and 3-4 shirts, and a little satchel. The main thing was the green water bottle and some food, and a little satchel. All their belongings were. They put several shirts on them, and this is July, so you can imagine, and that's and you put 2 or 3 pants on you. You don't carry them separate. The shoes. Maybe you put some around one. You can't. What did they have? They had nothing.
And they all had numbers.
Some had numbers. Some did not have numbers. Some were people that were who had come back, who had hidden out, and like us, and were through the organization was, and mainly younger people. The organization tried not to take older people because, in anticipation, eventually of a Jewish state, they wanted young people of military service, not old people, which will be a hindrance more than anything else. We did take some older people too, but why take somebody who's 90 years old? What for? It'll be a what do you call it? You have to, they're useless. I mean, it's hard to say, but a person that cannot help you, cannot do anything.
Now you having had spent the war in Europe, you had seen survivors, you had experienced.
Yes.
It. The other people that were on the crew?
It was the first time.
First time.
Yeah.
Do you remember how they reacted?
Well, they felt vindicated of coming, that they are helping. They wanted to help their people. I want to help my people. And this, when they saw this, they said, we never expected that. I mean, when we talked among ourselves, they knew my story aboard. And of course, when we came to France, I was the interpreter everywhere. When the customs came aboard, when we first arrived in Marseille, they started poking, and one guy, Maraïen, had bought 100 cartons of cigarettes in anticipation of doing some black marketing. He was a nut. We had all kind of people. Jews or no Jews, everybody's the same. We all part of the same race that came out of Africa, according to the, Lucy. You saw that movie? No? Okay, that's where the human life sprang, and then we spread all over the world. And we mutated to different colors according to what nature wanted. But anyway, where was I? So they're poking around, and they see, they open up it, and they said, hey, that's for your personal use? And I'm with them because the captain, Ike, at that time became captain. Johnson left, and Ike became the captain. Okay. So he says, Sam, you go with the custom, you speak, and see what. So I'm going. So they said, oh no, we're gonna confiscate all that. So Murray says, no, Sam, do something. So I talked to the customs, and I said, I'll give you each a couple of cartons and forget about the thing. So they said, okay. Bribe. You can't help it. Someone once said that everybody has a price on his head. And I said, I don't. And he said, Sam, there is. If they make you a deal that it's worthwhile, you will. I mean, it's hard to comprehend that, but some people I undertake very easily, and others, they hold back up to a point. You know, it's like politicians. So anyway, we got the cops out, and Murray did sell some of his stuff. And do you think he offered me anything? I never asked anything. Do you think I got a thank you? No thank you. It's okay. All right, I don't mind. So we load the people, and we get out the set. Our luck that the steel cable holding back the ship to the dock, when they let it go, wrapped itself around the anchor. What do you call it?
Propeller?
The propeller. So, Bernie Marks is the first mate. And he jumps in the water with it and see what's wrong. So he comes back up, he says, we stuck. I don't know how to unroll it. I'll take first they tried to, with a hatchet. I said, really, not a hatchet, you take a hacksaw. So they got some hacksaws and they going underwater and hacking, coming up for air. And then finally we got loose. So we're waiting for the port of set is like, it's like a, what do you call it? Like a jigsaw, not jigsaw puzzle, like you have, what's that name in English? You cannot go out by yourself a ship of that size from the port because it's a series of maneuvers, and you need a port.
Like a tugboat?
No, not a tugboat. You don't need a tugboat. You need a pilot, a ship's pilot. The ship's pilot didn't come because the British threatened the French government, so they held back. So we had to go out on our own. So Bernie Mars and Ike, by using the walls of the inner port, we went there, and the good feature about the Exodus, the President Warfield, had a steel girder around it, so that when it reaches docks, it won't crush the wooden part of it, the upper structures. So this is like something that you can press against it. So they made the ship. I was not at the helm at that time. The mates were they knew they were a little bit, they trusted themselves more than, I used to be one of the top helmsmen, but that's later on. So I'll tell you about that. So they pushed against the back of the ship or the side of the ship, and then went to the other side, pushed the other, and it was, how do you call that?
Like a maze?
A maze. So finally, we got out to the open sea. We go out. Sam, you come and take the helm. Why? Because when in port, we were loading something, and we have steel doors to load. We have no booms. It's not like a cargo ship that you have booms. There were no booms. Everything went, when you open up the sea doors, that's where you load everything. Not passengers, but you load food, you load cars, you load things. I went to close the sea door, and I was like this, now putting, and my finger, see this finger, is in the door. And then I went like this, and then, and I crushed it. You see, it's still, now it has rheumatism, but you see, it's not even. So I'm bleeding. I put a thing in, and the purser, Halivni, his name is Livni too, not Halivni, but Livni. He finally settled right away in the kibbutz, in up in Galilee, and he passed away too. All right, I'll come back to the kibbutz. And we went to a doctor, and you look at it, he says, "Oh, the black nail you'll get a new one," and he wrapped it up. So I wasn't good to do any other thing but to be at the wheel. So from the time we left, I'm sorry, that's before we loaded the people. I had gone for 12 hours from that part of France to Italy. I was the only one that stayed at the helm, with all three mates coming at different time to make sure that they were their watch. So anyway, so now I'm coming back. So we leave set with 4,500 people, and who's waiting out there in the in the Mediterranean? British destroyer.
Already?
Yeah, right out of there. So we keep going.
One second. Yossi Harel?
Yossi Harel was the commander.
When did he come on the ship?
He was there at the time.
He
came with the people.
But only
In Set. Yeah. I didn't know him before. I didn't know. Actually, Yossi Harel and I, he really took me under his wing, and he was a powerhouse. He was soft-spoken, but he knew who to give this and how to give this. He gave me jobs that he wouldn't give to anybody else. He wouldn't trust anybody else. But that's part of the story, you know. Anyway, we keep going. The next day, there's another destroyer, until we had the whole British Mediterranean fleet with the cruiser Ajax and the admiral commander of the fleet aboard. So we are accompanied at a distance, of course, not right close, along the Mediterranean with 6 ships, 6 destroyer, and one the Ajax was a powerful boat with the admiral aboard, and they keep telling us, "Who are you? Where are you going?" And we answer. I didn't, but some of the Haganah members answer. We're going to China. We're going to China. It making fun. And then we used to play the British anthem. God Save the Queen or the King, and that. Mocking them, and they kept saying, "Do not try to get to Palestine. We will board you," and blah blah blah. So finally, after a few days, we got to approaching. I think we're about 60 miles or so from Palestine. Ike, of course, Yossi Harel was talking with Ike. He says, we're going to attempt to beach it outside Tel Aviv in the Negev area to beach the boat. And then the Haganah will be there and will unload. 4,500 people, it's not 100 people you take off a boat and make them disappear. Israel is not that big. The British are no fools either. So we made. I was not at the helm.
What do you think is going to happen now? Are you nervous?
No, we don't know what's going to happen.
Well, you know that the British are.
Yes, but we have 4,500 people aboard. It's not a ship that has 1,200 or 2,000.
Was this unusual? There were a lot of ships that were coming. Were they all followed by so many British ships?
Yes, and they were told, if you don't follow us to Cyprus, we will board you, you will get hurt, and you'll have to follow anyway. And you'll endanger all the people aboard. So after some resisted for about a half an hour, and then followed to Cyprus. Okay, so then they went into, there were two camps in Cyprus, Ilatumbu and Karolos. And one was in the mountains and one was near the sea. So people were interned. There were about 50,000 at total, I think, at one time, or at least 30,000. I mean, I know that we brought about 50,000 through the Aryeh. Now, we weren't always successful, but that was. So here it's July of 1947, and we're approaching. So they diverted the ship towards Egypt.
I'm sorry. The boat is still the President Warfield?
No, it's already, it was christened the Exodus 47. When they started saying, do not attempt to go, we just brought up the flag, a big a sign, Exodus 1947. And we put up the present Israeli flag and brought down the Honduras flag or whatever. And we just kept going. So we tried, they made a maneuver towards Egypt, trying to fool them. And then we moved again back towards Palestine at that time. And the night, as the night ended, I was not at the helm. I was waking up. I heard like the ship was lifted up and fell back into the water, and that was the beginning when they assaulted, came aboard, and I got out, and I went to the wheelhouse, and Bill Bernstein, who was my mate, said, Sam, go back and help the people, repel the British. I'll take care of it here. And he got killed.
Well, tell me what happened.
Well, he refused when the British commandos came aboard.
You're on the boat, and now the British have rammed.
Are coming from they ram and then they leave. As they ram, they detachments of commandos come aboard. Okay, on both sides, and their idea is to get control of the ship. So they have to go to the wheelhouse.
All the people are below.
No, most of them are on deck.
Passengers are on deck.
You have all young people on deck with potatoes, canned goods, and we throwing them. You know, to get hit by a big potato, it's no fun. To get hit by a can, it's even worse. And anything they could find, they were throwing at the British.
So you were ready. You knew that the British were going to board. You were ready.
Yes. They said, and Yossi Harel said, we are going to make a stand. I mean, he took it, he talked it over with we had a contact with the Haganah in Palestine. And it went back and forth with the politician. What shall we do? He didn't take things on his own. Once they said, we leave it up to you, then this is what they decided. He said, we'll fight them as long as we can, making sure that we don't sink. And lucky, while during the fighting, I don't know what's going on. I'm at the stern in the back. Murayen, the crazy guy, sweetheart, but a crazy guy. He's trying to let down a raft. Rafts are very heavy. He says, Sam, I look at him, he's trying to, I said, you're a seaman, don't you know how to let go of it? He says, no, how do you slide down that thing? I said, what if we sink? How are you going to get that thing down? So I said, okay, wait till a destroyer comes along. Oh, the Aryeh was a cruiser. These were destroyers. I said, when the destroyer comes along and ram us, we'll let it down. He says, okay. He'll tell me. I say, I'll tell you. I'm staying here with you. The cruiser, the destroyer comes along, hits. He came out too hard. And we let down. I said, kick that grommet there. And he kicked on his side, and that thing slid down. That's how you do it when in an emergency. And then when it's floating, you jump in the water with your life jacket, and then you go aboard, right? Okay. That, I told him to let go. We both kicked at the same time. When I say now, it went into the wheelhouse of the destroyer. And the captain came out screaming, "You bastard! You destroyed my ship!" And then when he pulled away whatever power he had, there was a big slice on the side from our bumper. He had come too hard. Before they used to come close and then lift up. This time they came, he sliced. That ship was out of commission, went into dry dock probably. Okay, and then after the wheelhouse was secured, we're told to stop everything. And they said, you will follow. They took control.
What happened to
Bill Bernstein, my mate, he got hit on the head. He refused to relinquish the wheel to one of the commandos. What can you do? There was a little fight. There was another guy, Bill Millman, who was next to him. He got shot in the jaw. They were both taken down when we got into Haifa. Bill didn't make it. Bill Bernstein didn't make it. Bill Millman got healed up. Years later, he had several operations. And finally, one time he had the whole lower part of his jaw hanging, until they plastic people and later on fixed it up. So, and he was a big guy. He was a boxer in the Navy. But, all right. So we get to Haifa Harbor, and we let down, and the first thing they do is put DDT. That was the big thing. Make sure there's no, DDT. You remember that? And then we keep walking, and then there were 3 prison ships. And they said, we'll take you to, they go to Cyprus. That's what happened when the ship were brought into Haifa. Instead of going to the bigger ship, the smaller ships were either taken to Cyprus or brought here. They brought here, then they transferred to a prison ship, and then taken out. What's a prison ship? It's a cargo ship with enclosures on deck, so you can't come out. You're like penned in, and down underneath, they're just the empty floors, and you sleep on the steel floors for the overnight run to Cyprus. You put your own clothing, whatever it is. No mattresses or anything. So there are 3 ships: the Empire Empire Rival, the Ocean Vigor, which I was put aboard, and the Runnymede Park. Each one gets about 1,500 people. Oh. Can you get me the phone there? Can I continue, Stacy?
You sure can.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
sure can.
So each ship got about 1,500 people. Some of the crew was told to remain aboard, and they had made hidden areas, hidden closets, like in the ship below, where the British couldn't find us or weren't interested in finding anyone. And we're told that the next day, the Jewish-Palestinian crew come and clean the ship because, you got to get all the garbage out. It's the smell, the terrible. You leave behind your clothing, and and they will give you outfits that you're part of the cleaning crew. And when you finish cleaning the ship, the British will take you and let you out into the port. So you'll go, and then we'll take care of you there. So about, I don't know how many, but some were told, I was told, you go with the people. Okay. So we thought we were going to Cyprus. Mr. Bevan, who was the foreign minister at the time, decided, let them go back to France. Let France take care of them. Okay? So we sailed back to, and let me tell you, it was so hot, and we sleeping on the plane, you know, just like we are now, just on the plane, steel decks below, you know, and we're getting wormy food from the British, you know, the slop, you know. It lasted a few days until we got back to set, and we anchored outside, and the British are trying to get the French to take us back where they came from. That's where you embarked, that's where you should disembark. We refused. The French says they don't want to come down. We're not going to force them down. So I think we stayed there for about a month.
Who decided to refuse?
Yossi Harel.
So Yossi was still... Yossi?
I don't know if he was still there, but some of the crew members and some of the Israeli Haganah people also that came with the people, they remained with the people in each hole, on each ship. About a week or two later, somebody comes aboard and says, is Sam Schulman around? I said, yes. And so he says, the Haganah wants you to come down. We understand you speak French. We want you to be interpreter with us and to help us ashore. I said, fine. I didn't ask for it. I was going to stay with the people. And a few other of the wounded, like Nat Nadler and a few others, decided to go down, and they took us to the hospital. We stayed overnight, and the next day we got up, and the nurse said, no, you can't, you're sick, you know, and we just walked away, you know. They came to pick us up, walked away. Okay, why did they want me? Speaking French, I was their interpreter, and I got to be in good, how would you say, in good relation with what it would be the governor of that area of Marseille area. And I got things done that the Palestinian Jews couldn't do it. Even if they spoke French, they couldn't do it. He just took a liking to me, and I was able to do things for the Haganah that they couldn't do it. So we got food, we got all kind of things, and I prevail upon him. He says, the people don't want to leave. They don't want to come ashore here. So after 1 month, Bevan decided, let them go back to Germany. So the ship went back to Germany. After that, I don't know what happened.
Okay. Do you know, while this is happening, do you know what the world is thinking about this? The media? Do you have any idea how people are perceiving
Well,
this?
there was I had a little bit of the news of the English press that I had in the Middle East about the whole thing. That, you know, it was a big thing. It was a big scoop of big news of the year, and you know, here the people survived the death camps, and they not allowed them there, and they pushed back and sent back to the death camps. You know, it played it up, you know, and for good reason. And so then later on, I asked my friends that went to Germany with them, the American boys.
You stayed in France?
Yes, I stayed in France. Now, just wait. Yeah. So they said, oh, it was terrible. I said, that's not an answer. Tell me. He says, I can't tell you. It was so bad. I said, okay, forget it. And I still don't know what happened. I found a little bit they refused to get off in Germany. So the British came aboard and dragged them down, and some were hit here and there, you know, the usual stuff, you know. And finally, eventually what happened is when the state was established, they were the first legal Aryeh to go. Okay. Now, I remained in France. So I said, after recuperating in one of their spas, so to speak, recreation area in a small town near Marseille, I said, I would like to take another. What's the future? He says, well, I tell you, you speak French. We want you to take over to be the director of the DP camps of southern France. In other words, the future Aryeh, you pick the people, the young people, you manage, and blah, blah, blah. I said, I don't know anything about it. Now, how old am I? I'm 19. I'm 19 now. This is July 1947, so I'm 19. Okay, I have no idea of what that. They said, it's very easy. I said, where is it? He says, it's outside of Marseille, and you will take over from the present director, whose name is Shula Al-Lazarov, Al-Lazarov's daughter. You know, Rehov Al-Lazarov in Tel Aviv, and she was in charge. So here's big Shoshana Al-Lazarov. I mean, really. And she doesn't like me. And she's fighting with the other guys, but he doesn't belong to our party. I said, what the party? You make politics when we fighting for something together? Then finally one guy of a party says, I want him to be in charge. So I was in charge. Later on, this same guy was the brother-in-law of one of my friends, one of the crewmen, one of my friends. You know, I was talking with Tracy how people are connected. You start talking, you know, this one. So I lasted 1 month. Why? Because 24, my bed was in the office. The phone was ringing constantly. Whatever need, or what it is, and that, and we need 10 people, blah. And 24 hours, and people were coming from the main camp that I was in, saying, why, I'm here so long, why can't I go to Palestine? The person is 60, 65. How can I tell you we don't need old people there? I said, dearie, in due time. You know, she says, what am I doing here? What am I doing? And then the younger people says, when are we going? I said, soon. You know? So I lasted 1 month, and then I made an ultimatum to the head of the Mossad al-Yabet in Marseille. His name was Rudy. We called him Buck Teeth Rudy. He had something, his teeth were kind of spread apart like. So I said, I have enough. Get a replacement and get me another ship or send me back to the States. They wouldn't send me back to the States. So they said, okay, give us a time, we'll find a replacement, and we have a ship for you in Italy. So they got a replacement. They told me to meet someone, a Israeli, Palestinian Jews, not Israeli yet, to meet them in Cannes. And from Cannes, you will go to Monaco, and from Monaco, you'll be smuggled into Italy, and then you'll go to Milan, and from Milan, you'll go wherever the ship is at that time. Fine. So I met the guy. He spoke a little English. My Hebrew was not very good in those days, and still isn't that great now. And he spoke a little Yiddish. And he was a nice man, was much older than me. I don't remember his name. And then so from Cannes, we stayed a few days. And then he got the word to come to Monaco, that the smugglers will be there. Everything has to be arranged. You just can't come and it's done. And when I got to Monaco, we met near the port. And who is there? Two of my best friend from the, who will be eventually two of my best friends from the Exodus. I said, Teddy, Halivni, where? Teddy Vardy, his name was Rosenfeld, so he changed it. Halivni was Lifshitz, so it's time to Livni. I said, what are you doing here? He says, well, we went, after we left, we got off the ship, and they told us to go on a ship called the Penn York, and we were shuffling, what do you call it? Making believe that we are merchant ship from France to Morocco and back and forth, and it was disgusting because it was some kind of a chemical that we ate and bred the chemical in that ship. You know, it was a banana freighter, by the way. And I said, what are you doing? He says, well, we're supposed to take a ship in Italy. I said, me too. So here we are. Here again, customs come along, or the cops. We sitting there, the four of us, and papers. So we said, here's our paper. We're seamen. What are you doing in Monaco? I said, we're on leave from our ship in Marseille. We wanted to see what Monaco looks like. He says, yeah, you know, this is not, what are you doing in the port? I says, we're just resting here. I said, okay, I'll tell you what. I said to the Palestinian Jew, I said, do you have any cigarettes? He says, yeah. He said, give me a pack each, 2 packs. I gave them in. They said, oh, thank you. I said, okay, bye. You know what a cigarette meant in those days? I mean, everybody smoked an American cigarettes. Well, okay. The night fell. We go down to the port, all the way down, not on the upper part. And he knew there was a signal that he knew, the Palestinian guy. And we get aboard this little sailboat, or fishing boat rather, fishing boat. And we go across, must have been about 11 at night we started out. About 12 o'clock we're on the other side, near, the border is very close, Ventimiglia and Monaco, and then you have the French. And they were nice enough, they didn't come ashore because they beached the boat, but the water was still coming. So they put us on their back, the Italian smugglers. So we weren't getting our feet wet. And then they told us, go into this house, they work with us, they know that you're here, and then they'll keep you overnight, and the next day you'll take the train to Milan. So we went in. They put us in a cheese cellar. Oh, boy. You know what it is to be in a cheese cellar at night? You woke up, you didn't sleep. You had a head like this, the smell of the ripe cheeses. So we got up, the four of us. We went to the railroad station. We got tickets, and we boarded the train to Milan. We got to Milan, and then we went from Milan. The Palestinian, he says, we go to a camp outside of Milan, and then they'll decide what to do with you people, you know. And so we stayed a few days there. We did visit Milan a little bit on a, let's say a tiyul, if you want to call it a tiyul, and they decided to send us to Venice, where we will be taking the ship. Unfortunately, it was the Penn Crescent, the sister ship of the Penn York that they had sailed with cargo, and which were going the same place eventually. And the ship was British underwater demolition team had put a big hole in the bow So the ship could not sail, so we had to go in dry dock. So we put the ship in dry dock, and they had to repair. They had to pump out. It's amazing to see a ship when you're in dry dock, if you've ever been. You go down all the way down, they pump out all the water, and the ship is standing on supports. And you look at it, and here's that big steel hole of the bow. The ship could not sail out. It was just enough to get to the to the dry dock. So it took a while until they put a new plate and decided the ship, a test trial to see that the ship was seaworthy. And then we waited outside, and then we took one guy in Venice. We stayed a little while in Venice after the ship was fixed. I was on guard at the on the you have to come aboard with going on the gangplank. And who comes there? The future admiral of the Israeli Navy. His name was Schulman too, but without a C. Paul Schulman. He comes. He's a graduate of the academy here in Annapolis. He comes aboard. He says, I'm coming aboard the ship. I says, who are you? He says, I'm Paul Schulman. I says, I'm Sam Schulman. I don't know any Paul Schulman. He says, no, I said, I don't know you. I said, if you come any further, I'll throw you overboard. I said, get somebody that I know, and I'll let you. You can have the ship all to yourself. So he went back. He didn't insist. And then he came back with someone of the local Italian, what do you call it, ships chandlers. And he said, the man is okay. So then I let him out. And then he looked there, he toured around. He wanted to see how the ship is and who's there. And we took on an Italian crew. The only three aboard were the three of us from the Exodus. Our job, I don't know what our job was, but we didn't do anything. I guess it was a way of that when we take on the people, then we found out that we are going to Romania. So here the two ships following one another, these two banana freighters, Pan York and Penn Crescent. I'm on the Penn Crescent. Ike is on the Ike is not aboard on the Penn Crescent. We have an Italian captain, an old sea salt. I think he's retired, and we have a Italian crew, and then the three American boys, including myself. And we eat with the officers. We don't know what to do with ourselves. And then, before we sailed...
How many passengers?
No passengers yet. When we sailed from Venice, the third mate decided to quit. I don't know why. Seamen are temperamental, Hey, I don't want to. So there's only two mates and the captain. You need 3 shifts. So the captain says, Sam, how would you like to be third mate? I said, you have to teach me navigation. He says, that's very easy. So within a few hours, he told me how to keep a watch with someone underneath, how to tell him how to keep the course and everything. It's not hard, it's a little more complicated if you go further, because being a mate is not just navigation, it's also loading cargo, unloading, all kind of thing. But for this purpose, I was a relief third mate. Fine. So I did that for a few days until we got to port, to Romania, to Constanza. And something I want to tell you also, we talk about being seasick on our first maiden voyage. Afterwards, I got earthsick when I got off the boat. I had to get back aboard ship. I wasn't used to be on solid ground. I had no sea, even up to now, when I get on a ship, there's no seasickness. It's just one of those things. But I remember going as a child to Europe, I was very sick. And on the way back, I was very sick too. So I overcame my seasickness. So we stayed in Constanța, which is the main port of Romania. This is 1947, the end. We're there October, November, December. We were fixing up the boat. Here's a banana freighter. So the hatches are empty. So here they're building, and there's refrigeration. In the 1920s, they had refrigeration on banana freighters because this used to belong to United Fruit, and they used to go to South America, bring bananas and other fruit and perishables, and bring it. So air conditioning was already on, but only we never used it, but not in the cabins. So they fix up, and we go ashore. My friend Teddy, who was born in Hungary and came here as a baby, went to see his family there and told people, if you want to leave, I'll make you come aboard here. Okay. He had cousins. They decided to leave. That's after World War II already. This is 1947, the end of 47. And everything is becoming communist. When a month or two after we came, Anna Poker, who was the head of the Communist Party in Romania, took over the government with Stalin's help, but did not interfere with us. Did help us. She was Jewish. It's not her fault, but she was Jewish. And I think eventually she was eliminated by, Stalin. Oh boy, what a guy. Anyway, we fixed up the ship, and then we found out that we're going to pick up the refugees in Bulgaria. Okay. So both ships leave for Bulgaria at the end of December 1947. And Yossi Harel comes over to me. He says, Sam, don't tell anybody. I want you to go up to near Sofia. Oh, what's the name of that? It's a train crossroad, or a train crossroad. There's another name for it. A switching for the Bulgarian railroad. That some go to the port. Burgas was the main port. That's where we were. There will be 12 trains with refugees. We will have about 17,000 people between the two ships. I want you to go up and the train what do you call it? The station master is on notice that you will be in charge. He has nothing to do, not to interfere with you. The government in Sofia, Bulgaria, Sofia, told him, we arranged with the Bulgarian authorities that you're in charge of the traffic there. Each train that comes by, you tell the leader in each train, who was a Israeli, or a Palestinian Jew, not Israeli yet, to tell the people to get off the train, do whatever they have to, get better. They have about a half an hour to do whatever they need. Don't just to think the smell, that 12th train load of 17,000 people left behind there. Anyway, they did that. Then they go. Then an hour later or so, another train. I was there for over 12 hours. And it was cold in the mountains. And Yossi told me, he says, make sure you get something warm. And I had a Bulgarian Jewish interpreter, a young kid of 16 years old, who knew a little bit of English and Yiddish. And I used to tell him what to tell the station master. The station master wasn't happy about being relegated to, and what he saw the people getting off, he said, oh my God, look at all that garbage out there, you know. But it's good that it was freezing, so the smell was not too bad, you know. Every hour or an hour and a half, another train came, and I was told I asked if it's the last train. And the last train, the guy said, we're the last train. So after everybody did, I told the station master, it's all yours through the interpreter. And I told the kid, come with me on the train. Our job is finished here. And we got to the port. And that was daylight now. Oh my God. People coming down the ramps from all sides, loading on the boats. I mean, if you think that 4,500 was a sight, 17,000 people, 8,500 on each boat. Well, ours had a few more on the Penn Crescent, and we finally. Also, we told them no water bottles. And what did they carry? The same thing, several suits of clothing. That's the only way. You don't want luggage. A little luggage, okay? And maybe a little bag with food just for them. They said, any food, throw it on the ground. And the gypsies were waiting to grab the food. The gypsies were not loved too much in Europe, but they were hungry. They were grabbing whatever it was. So we finally loaded, and we start moving out. Now here we are in the Black Sea. So we have to go through Turkey, through the Dardanelles and the Bosphorus. When we get to the entrance of of Turkey, we have to take a what do you call it? A pilot. You can't go through Istanbul waterway without. There are boats coming from all sides, you know. So we get the pilot. I'm at the wheel. We get over, and then I continue at the wheel. The Palestinian crew the Italian crew is now put. The captain is not in charge. The officers, the two other officers, the first and second mate, are not in charge. So I'm at the wheel with Ike. That's the only time. I don't know why they got him there, but that's the only time that he really had a job. The captain, the Italian captain, wasn't very happy to be. He says, well, I could have come. We didn't have to send someone else. All right. Anyway, we get out into the Asian Sea, and here are the British. And the same ultimatum. Where are you going? If you try attempt, we will board you, and blah, blah, blah. So Yossi Harel called on the secret.
So Yossi Harel and Ike Aranos were on this boat also?
On the Penn Crescent, on my boat. And on the other boat, the captain was, what's his name? Ehud. We didn't see eye to eye while we were in Romania, But later on at the reunion, he apologized to me for being so nasty to me. He says, "You were only a seaman. I'm a captain because once I went aboard," he says, "you have to ask my permission to come from your boat to mine." I said, "Okay, pardon me." So I got off. I didn't go back on this boat. It was side by side. All of a sudden, he's a big guy, you know. But anyway, that atoned later. So we followed. He said, the idea is to follow the ships to Cyprus. We'll anchor outside of Cyprus and outside of Famagusta. Each ship will unload at the pier and then pull back and anchor outside, in the outside of the port. And there will a part of the crew will remain, of the American people. Why? Because if you abandon ship, they call it spoil of war. They seize the ship and they can do whatever they want. As long as we have crew people of that ship aboard, they can't do even one person. So they put a detachment of soldiers on each boat, and that's the way we stayed. So we got there, we left on the last day of December 1947. We celebrated New Year's, some celebration of 1948 at sea, going through the Aegean Sea, and then we got taken to Cyprus in January, beginning January, 2nd or 3rd of January 1948. Okay? I remained aboard the Penn Crescent. Ike remained aboard too, with another couple of people. Of course, the British didn't know who was who. They know we were crewmen. They didn't know anything about Haganah or anything. They didn't even try to do it. And Ike and I, we were allowed to go ashore. We were a prisoner of His Majesty, or Her Majesty at that time, I remember. No, maybe His Majesty. I don't think Elizabeth was queen then yet. No, not sure. Anyway, we were allowed to go, but we had to come back at night back to the ship. So we did. So we went to Famagusta. We ate out there, you know, and learned how to eat Greek food, you know, meze and all that jazz, you know. It's not bad, you know. And we stayed there. And then Ike and I, we had some weapons aboard. And we smuggled.
You okay? Just a few more minutes, just to finish up.
Yeah.
Okay.
We smuggled some weapons, pistols. I don't know how they let us through into the camp. I went. I needed dental work, you know, so they allowed me in, and Ike went too. We both loaded. Here it's warm. And we had to put jackets on, and here we bulging, and the guards just go in. I said, "We're from the ship. We're going to dental, see a doctor." Go. Okay, we all. And there, the head of the camp says, "Sam, we would like you to take care of both camps here, to be the director." Pardon?
Do you know who the head of the camp was?
I don't remember. His name was God something. I don't remember. I said, "No, thank you. Either you send me to Palestine or send me back to the States." My same threat, you know. So they said, "Okay, we'll find a way. But in the meantime, stay on the ships. We'll have to find a replacement because we don't want it." Okay. In the meantime, Avi and Teddy, my two best friends, were sent to Israel. Okay, they went with the Kedma. Kedma was the only passenger ship at that time, and was run by a Palestinian Jewish crew, maybe a few Arab members also aboard, seamen, and there was a Jewish officers. You know, at that time, Palestinian Jews were already getting Siemens officers that were trained and so on. Those that got, see, he got Gad Ehud. Gad Ehud was the captain of the Penn York, and he had captain's paper from the British, because during World War II, he had worked aboard British ship, and somehow he made it. I had only a second mate, navigator. He didn't even have first mate, but somehow he was very smart. He didn't know how to talk to people, but he was very smart. He knew how to navigate and everything. But otherwise, anyway, he couldn't hold his liquor either. He smelled the cork, he was already drunk. Stacy knows what I mean. So anyway, so finally, and I was very friendly with the captain in charge of the detachment of soldiers aboard. You know, just a petty talk, you know, so and so. Then not too much about my background or anything. And the day I'm told, you come down, come to the camp, and you'll go with the next batch of refugees as a crew member. So I got there, and who's in charge of checking the passenger? The captain of the detachment. He says, "Hi, Sam, how you doing?" And I speak in English. I says, "I don't know who are you?" And he's talking to me. He says, "Aren't you the chap back on the ship?" And I said, "Well, what, you know?" And he says, "Well," he says, "good luck to you." He understood. He says, "Go." What does he care? So that's then the crew took me in. I mean, one of the camp guys was also part of the operation, so he knew me, and I slept with the crew. And then the next morning we were in Palestine. So there they brought me down to Athlete. You know, you come down, and then they sort you out. You know, who are you? You know. So I slept overnight. I come to the office next day to be interrogated, not by the British, but the Palestinian Jews. And I said, I'm from the Penn ships. Oh, wait a moment. We know that. So one guy that I knew from Italy, from the Palestinians, came and he says, "All right, Sam, you're here." His name was Itzik. He was a little guy, but a Mr. Universe. Wow, powerful. I wouldn't tangle with him. And he says, "Come with me." And so we went to, he says, first of all, I said, "I have no clothing. Everything was left behind. I mean, my duffel bag with all my stuff, you know." So he says, "Come to me." So we go to a men's clothing store. Who do you think owns it? Yossi Harel. His name was Yossi Hamburger. He says, "Sam, take whatever you need." So I took an outfit, I took shoes, I took underwear, and so on. He says, "What do you want to do now? Do you want another ship?" I said, "No, I want to go to meet my Kutza built Mishmah HaNegev. It's at the beginning. I want to join him." So he says, "Okay, I'll get a driver that's going to Tel Aviv, and from Tel Aviv you'll take a bus and outside of Tel Aviv that goes down to the Negev." And he says, "I'm sure it stops at Beersheba, and probably it'll let you off just before wherever the kibbutz is." You know, the Negev is not what it is today. Oh my God, was that empty? It was a desert. You know, I mean, something was growing, but it was people. They're crazy, but not anymore. It's amazing what they've done. So I went there. I get there. Oh, before that, I stop in Tel Aviv. I go to Tel Aviv. I stop in Tel Aviv. I went to see my grandmother's younger sister, who was a year younger than my mother. My mother used to call her aunt. I called her Hadassah, like a buddy, you know. my granddad used to say, "What is that tanta business?" You know, why is she acting like a little girl? You know, so I said, "That's her problem." She was the head nurse of Hadassah Hospital, and she had known. My mother had written to her that I may show up in Israel, but you know, during the 2 years that I was out traveling, I had sent letters. And I got letters at certain drops that was forwarded through the Haganah to where I'll be next. They didn't know where we're going to be next. And it was maybe several months behind, you know. I couldn't call like today, you know. This is 1940s, different. And so I stayed overnight, a few nights with them, get acquainted with my grandaunt, who said she had seen me in the 1930s in Paris. But I didn't remember. She had come back. She made Aliyah in the 1920s with her husband. His name was Aryeh. And and they were one of the first that left Poland early as pioneers. So she was already a graduate nurse. He was a graduate air conditioning engineer. There's no need of engineers in the of air conditioning in 1920. They didn't even know what it was in Palestine or in the Middle East. So then I said, I'm going to the kibbutz. She says, why do you want the kibbutz? You stay here. I said, no, I have to go there. So I went there, and when I got there, all my buddies, all my friends said, what in the world are you doing here? You came from the United States here? I said, I told you I'll be here. I'll come with you and build. He says, we don't dance the horror. We don't have any strength to dance at the end of the day. It's hot here. I wish we could go back to Europe. I says, why? They took all our identity papers, so we have no proof that we are... yes, I didn't want to tell them that. We took all the documents of the refugees so that they couldn't go back. I mean, that's, I don't know if you want to add that, but this is one of the facts. I'm telling you as it is, you know. And there's more and more and more and more. Anyway, I stayed there 3 months, and I was told, I said, did you get my message from the secret transmitter to use transmits that when I was in Romania, that I'll be seeing you soon? They said, yes, but we couldn't understand what you were talking about. I mean, what are you doing over there? We didn't know what... and they said, by the way, we went the same way on a small boat, and we went to Cyprus, and then we went to Athlete. They were at the beginning of the Aliyah, so the British landed them in Palestine, held them there, and then slowly let them out. So they said, you're crazy. He says, you have a chance to go back. Why don't you go back? I said, no, I won't. So I stayed for about 3-4 months. February, March, April. Beginning May was the establishment of the state. I was told, Yossi told me, when the state will be established, which was sure, or already the UN had voted already of the partition, we want you back in Haifa to train the future Navy people. I said, train in what? In guns? No, in seamanship. How to do ship, not the war part, the technical part of the, and also navigation and so on. I said, okay, you know. So they didn't know what to do with me in Mishma HaNegev. It was at the beginning. It was a miserable place, let me tell you. If you go today, if you take a look, even the last time I was there a few years ago, it was beautiful. But now, my God, it's a retirement place. People are buying houses there from the kibbutz, and I have I went into the computer, and they have a aerial view of Mishmar Negev. I can't believe it. Since I was there last, it's a spa. They're now exporting. Their main thing when I was there, after I left and came back and visited them several times through the years, they had a factory that made ready-made walls for building. It's made out of plastic and concrete, and I don't know, something. That factory cost almost, at that time, $1 million. They invested, and everybody now they're exporting to Europe to build housing. That's how good they are. So whoever's a member, there's very few jobs for them, so they work outside and bring in, That's the kibbutz today. It's finished though, and you don't. I don't know when I was there. They started after I left. When I came back another time with my family, each one had a beautiful little house. The old timers, 2 bedrooms, gorgeous. That's where we stayed with one of my best friend there, and who are gone too. Oh boy. We ate in the main what do you call it? In common, lunches, breakfast, and so on. After that, they cut that out. You get a stipend. You eat by yourself. You don't eat anymore. You can eat by yourself. You buy. They have it like a grocery, a supermarket in place. You buy there, this is your allowance, and that's it, according to what you... It's amazing.
1 second. What
do you feel like you still need or have?
I have like 2 questions, just kind of like reflection questions that I'm curious. You have a couple more minutes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I just want to, if you could, I want to hear you stayed in Israel until...
I stayed I came back in 1949, the middle of 1949.
And you worked helping train in the Navy?
For a while, yes. And then they didn't need me anymore. And, so to go back to the kibbutz, my whole aspect of the future has changed through travel. Had I gone directly from Europe with my friends, I probably wouldn't be here, would be a different, circumstance. Like, I meet you here. That's because something happened to me in the past. Otherwise, we never meet. So I decided that I didn't make it of what I expected, of what I wanted to settle in Israel, okay? I accomplished what I wanted. I didn't back out, but some of the volunteers did. After one run or before the run, say, this is not for me, you can have it. I went all the way as far as I could. And when I decided that that's it, it's time for me to pick things up for myself, I went back to the States, and as much I was a little disappointed of doing it. And a few months later, I was drafted during the Korean War. My parents says, you just came back from Israel and you went through all this and World War II and that. Why don't you go to college or go to Canada or go to a place of learning and you'll be exempt? I said, look, I'm an American citizen. I'm called to the arms. I'm going. So what happened? My good luck was that I was stationed for 2 years on Cape Cod. training others to be sent to the front. I was in an anti-aircraft outfit, and when I said they knew I spoke French and German and all European languages, why don't you send me to Europe? They said, no, you're staying as a cadre. You training everyone else in the new radar-operated anti-aircraft guns and so on. And every the 7 weeks of training, we got new guys in. The others went to the one way or the other, and I remained. I was home every weekend. So you see.
Look, I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
One, taking a step back, just curious. November 29th, 1947, the UN vote. Do you remember it? Where you were on a...
I vaguely remember it, but in November of 1947, I was in Romania.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember it, but we didn't pay attention to it because nothing was concrete. A vote is a one vote, until it materialized, there's nothing there.
So how about May 14th, 1948? Do you remember where you were?
I was in Haifa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was called to be there. Yeah. I saw the British departing. I saw the start of the fighting down in the Namal, in the port, between the Arab population lived in the port area, and maybe they still do a little bit. I mean, things are different. And actually, Haifa was a very quiet town. I mean, the Arab population and Jewish population, we're fine with each other. It's the outlying areas, because they interacted with one another. Some intermarried. I have a cousin who intermarried with a Arab. I don't know if he's Muslim or Christian, and he was happened to be a petroleum engineer, and he went to Saudi Arabia, and he took my cousin with her. Of course, the family disowned her, completely. Oh my God, these things. But I met my cousin, a distant cousin, who was coming to the United States. That's going way back, before I was married, and he was a sweetheart. I said, and his grandma was there, my mother's cousin. So he says, yeah, I know. I go to Israel, but I can't go direct from Israel to Saudi. I have to go the other way. I go to all and there to rejoin my parents. I don't know what happened to him, but people are they are good with one another. It's circumstance that makes them hate one another. Who knows?
Do you have any regrets?
No, none whatsoever. None whatsoever.
All the choices, being involved in this.
No regret at any stage.
How did...
Actually, I'm very proud of it.
Well,
I mean, I don't go around yelling, I'm proud, and
yeah. How did being involved in this really history changing?
Yes, yeah.
How did that change you? How did it impact the rest of your life? How do you think about it?
Well, it affected me in the fact that that's how I got to be married with the gal that you just saw. Her father was at their temple, was in charge of either Israeli bonds or something similar to it. And one of my friends from the Exodus happened to be a speaker there. I never spoke. I didn't want to. I did my job and that's it. Those guys, they bragged. Everybody, like I used to say, my saying is, we're 45 crew members, and there were 44 captains. Guess who was the only seaman? That's the way I answer. Everybody, but when I attended one of there and they billed themselves a captain, they never mentioned it because they look at me and I look at them. I said, "Do you want to be the captain? Be the captain. Big deal, you know." So my father-in-law was talking to my friend who finished talking UJA or Barnes, one or the other. And what brought to talk about, he says, I have a daughter who studied in Israel. Eileen went to the junior year abroad, was at the Hebrew University. And so he says, oh, I have a friend of mine. He was on the Exodus. So he says, is he single? He says, no. Yeah, he's single. My daughter too is single. And he says, oh, okay, give me her phone number. And he didn't say anything further. Then he calls me, he gets home, he says, son, I got a girl for you. I says, what are you pimping or something? What is this? I'm not able to. He says, oh, this girl is something. Did you see her? No, but her father, every father says, my daughter is the best, most people. I said, okay, give me the phone number. For 2 weeks, he called me every day. Did you call her yet? I said, no, when due time, I'll call. Finally, to get rid of him, I called her. She says, she was a student teaching in one of the high schools. She says, I can't this weekend because I have to correct papers. It was, I think, June or something of 1963. Yeah. I said, okay, how about next week? Well, I have to go with my father at a concert. Okay. So he kept calling me. I said, look, she gives me the runaround. What do you buy me? Let me live my own life. So finally, I tried one more time. She says, okay. So I went to her. She lived in a residential hotel on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. I opened the door. I called down. We can't go in. You have the desk. And she said, okay, come on up. I wasn't, after I finished working. I stayed in town, and she says, come on up. She opens the door, she goes, I still don't know why she went. She says, because you were old. I'm 12 years older than her. She went like this. And she lived with two girls who were teaching in the same high school outside in Mount Vernon. She was from Mount Vernon. No, she was teaching in nearby Mount Vernon with the two girls. And, blah, blah. I said, okay, would you like to have a cup of coffee? She said, sure. I never, on our first date, I took it to the cheapest places. And then if it worked out, I went a little bit higher until the person, I decided, that's it. I'll call you again soon. I'll call you. That means don't bother. So I had one cup of coffee, and then I said, I know some friends of mine who opened up a kind of a coffee place. They are Italians. I was in the jewelry business in the Italian neighborhood, and I know a lot of Italian guys. And they may have been mafiosos, but they were nice guys to me. Whatever they did on their own, that's their business. So one guy who was a mafioso, he said, he worked in the area. He says, Sam, anytime you want, bring a date or by yourself. You can have all the free coffee, anything, whatever you want there. Okay. So I took her over there, and we had a few cups of coffee. He didn't charge. He says, no, it's on the house. He says, thank you. And then I said, would you like to go to a Israeli coffee house down in the village? She says, yes. And, in the meantime, she told me she has gone a junior year abroad in Israel, and I told her about my past a little bit, It was from one coffee. I never have so many coffees in my life, And then we finished up in the village, and then I said, I have a French little vacation place in New Jersey. It's about an hour and a half from Manhattan. Would you like to go for the day this weekend? She says, no. Before that, I said, I like that. I said, the coming weekend, that was the middle of the week. I said, I'd like to take you out Saturday night. She says, okay. I said, do you like French food? She says, I know what she answered. I took her to a very cheap French restaurant. Good, but very reasonable. She ate everything. And I said, that I like, because most of the time I had dates. They said they don't like this is too fat, this is too sweet, and when I'm spending money on somebody who don't like this and that, I said, okay, I'll call you. Blah, blah, blah. I said, I know a place in New Jersey which I go from time to time to meet French people there. It's a nice place. We can go for the day, and it's very restful, and they have very good food. And we did. And about a week later, I proposed to her. She says, oh, I'm not sure. I don't know. Then she told her. Then I met her parents. And when she decided, and the mother was frantic. My God, this was July. This was June or May, and they wanted for August. So we had the wedding in August. I mean, I saw something good. Why let it go by? I went with so many gals, and I wasn't ready. Let's put it that way. I wasn't ready. Yeah.
Well, that's a great ending. That is a great outcome of the whole first part of this.
And of course, once I that goes, you can add it if not. Once I finished, I didn't finish my schooling in France because of World War II. We left Paris, and I didn't pick up in the little town, the little hamlet that I was a school teacher. She was single. She lived with her mother in the schoolhouse. She had one foot shorter than the other, and that is why probably nobody even bothered going with her. She was very sweet. It was a one-room schoolhouse, which the grades each different. That used to be in the old days. There may still be some in the United States in remote areas. So she was teaching several grades at the same time. And she was very strict. And I don't know how we got to talk. She says, Sam, I would like that you should continue your education beyond primary school, to go to lycée grade. I tried it a few times, and I said, what's the name? I said, Madame so-and-so, although she was a Mrs., I said, Madame Rouget, I'm sorry, but she knows why we were here. I said, my mind is not on study. I did a little bit, but you did so well for the week or two. I said, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. So she let go. But we're always on good terms. She said, anytime you want me to instruct you and to be, I'll be glad to do it. So when I was in the U.S. Army, I started courses through the armed forces. I got my high school diploma, and it was a high school diploma from New York State, which supposedly is the best, the strictest in the whole United States. And then I went on to college studies. It was very similar. in the evening, after the whatever we were doing during the day, when we were free, after dinner, I would study for about an hour and then mail it out. It was free postage. And then I would get the results with the corrections, and whether it's A or B or whatever it is, or what I did wrong. And I got once I left the Army, once I was discharged, I found out that I had a half a year of college credit. But I had no income. My parents couldn't afford anything. They didn't have any income. My stepfather had gone down to zero. He was already sick, and no money, very little money was coming in. And he wasn't working anymore for the Seat of Learning in Poland, which was destroyed. You know, that was the end of everything. So I went to Brooklyn College to find out what they can help me out and find. So they said, well, what do you want to do? The Army will pay part of it. I say, yeah, but it's not enough to support the GI Bill doesn't give enough money to support. He said, well, you could do some after-hour work, I said, how about watchmaking? Watchmaking? Yeah. I said, that's a profession you can take I was thinking of the wandering Jew, you know. You can do it any way you want. And there's always a demand for it if you're good at it. So they said, well, let me see what I have in schools of watchmaking. And this one takes so much money, this one. The Boulevard Watch Company has a school of watchmaking for disabled veterans free of charge. Let me give them a ring. I said, but I'm not disabled. Let me give them a ring. So they give a ring. They says, yes, we started to take non-disabled veterans because nobody wants to be a watchmaker, disabled or otherwise. So I made an arrangement with them, a date, went over, they interviewed me. They said, you ready? I said, I'm ready right now. He said, okay, the only thing is the school is free, but the tools of the trade you will have to buy from your GI Bill part or whatever thing. So he says, we're very lenient. You don't have to pay it in one shot. You'll get all the tools as you progress. You'll get the tools at cost, but it will be given. You can pay it in small installments, so it won't bankrupt you. I said, fine. I graduated in 6 months. I must have one of the fastest. I said, can I get a job at the factory? Oh no, that's not what we are here. You go out and prove yourself, and if we post watchmaker for the factory, you can apply, and then we'll evaluate you. And then you'll get a job here. But this was not the idea that we training people to come to work for the factory. I said, okay, lucky. As I finished with my little diploma, somebody in the family said, there's someone leaving for Texas. He has a little jewelry stores on the Bowery. Yeah, the Bowery's Canal Street is one of the jewelry district beside 48th Street. So, and he's a relative, distant relative of so-and-so. So I asked him, he says, okay, well, I went to see him. He said, now I went to see the store. He says, yes, because of my wife's health, I have to go to Texas. All kind of story. He says, the whole thing, if you give me $500, I will give you the safe, the bench, this, the showcase. It was half the size of this room, the store, on Hester Street, off the Bowery. And I thought it over, and I said, okay. And I said, okay, it's pending if I have the GI Bill. I talked with one guy in the Army, that was in the army with me, and he had become a lawyer